Hey everybody, how's it going? So we're here with the Arizona Psychedelic Society, Phoenix Psychedelic Society, all the psychedelic societies. There's Texas is here. Everybody's in the building. It's good times. And we're doing our weekly talk series. Mondays at Meraki. Everybody give it up for Alana back there behind the bar. Make sure you're tipping your kava tender. Tonight, we are very, very lucky to have an individual who I've gotten to know and who is just one of the greatest human beings on the planet. And he's pretty funny too, despite his awesomeness. Stuart Preston, who's been doing he's been doing a show called the Stoned Ape Show. And if you're familiar with Terence McKenna, talked about the Stoned Ape theory, and you can look up that if you don't know what it is.
I'll tell him all about it.
Okay, I'll let him do that. But Stuart has been taking this on the road and talking about how to deal with grief. He's got a very powerful message, and he does it with the rapist's wit that he has. Therapist wit.
There you go.
Therapist wit. Shit, I always get that wrong. Okay, anyways, enough of my stand-up, I suck. Let's get the real guy up here. Stuart, come on up. Stuart Preston, everybody.
Thank you, Gary. Please give Gary a big hand. Yeah, I've got to, before I officially get started, just got to do a little gratitude and thanks, and Gary's one of them. You know, this is my fourth time, actually, for the Phoenix, Arizona Psychedelic Society. Yeah. And how many of you guys have seen me do this here before? Okay, good, excellent. Yeah, so thank you, Gary. Gary also introduced me to his college class. And I ended up with a couple of friends from that, but I got to go speak. I didn't do it quite in the same style, but I got to go speak to this college class, so I'm grateful for you, brother. Also, Blair, over there, she invited me and took me out to Dallas to do the show for the Psychedelic Society of Texas. And I've been very lucky to do this show in Denver, Dallas, DC, Burning Man. Does anybody recognize the man on the shirt? Any burners out there? Yeah. This was made by a fellow burner as a gift to me, and so it's got special meaning. But yeah, grateful for all you guys being here tonight. So, real quick, before I jump into it, couple things to keep me out of jail. Any stories you hear from me tonight are either completely made up or happened in a legal setting. Right. Please don't ask me for drugs. This is not the Oprah show. There's not a bag of mushrooms under your chairs. All right. So yeah, that should keep me out of jail. All right. So what is this this presentation show, whatever it is, what it's about? Well, I've been doing stand-up comedy for 10 years now, and I got to a point in my comedy where I wanted it to start to mean something. I think all artists get to that point where they want their art to mean something. Art, you know, like I'm doing art. And so I thought about, and I know that when you're making people laugh, they are forgetting about their troubles in life. And I know that there's a value in that. And I like it when people come up to me later and say, hey, there really are Bible verses on the bottom of In-N-Out Burger wrappers and cups, So I like educating people with my comedy. But I wanted the comedy to really mean something. And it's like whenever I hear that song by Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth, something's happening here. Well, it ain't exactly clear. Leave the singing to Gary. That every time I hear that song, I just think, wow, I'm kind of starting to hate my comedy. Because it's not having that same impact, that this one stupid song does. And then the second part of the building of this story is tragedy struck my family. Deep grief, big loss. And when it happened, I would go out and I would talk openly about it, because that's I talk open, but also when you're a comedian, you start to learn just to share way too much. And so I would talk openly about what happened, and people would come up to me and they would say, wow, you're really brave, you're really strong. And I would tell them I don't feel brave or strong, I feel honestly weak and broken. But the more they kept telling me that, the more I thought, well, maybe something's happening here, and maybe I need to go out and tell the story. And then the third piece to this, which won't be as a big surprise to this crowd, but the third piece is that I chose to work with my grief in a unique way to the outside world, the people outside of the Kava Bar, is with psychedelics. And so all that came together to form this presentation, is what I'll say. And it's basically just a story of an average guy going through life when the bomb of tragedy goes off and how he deals with it. So we'll just start with that. So I started off this whole thing as just your very average, normal, short-haired person, right? I went to Arizona State University, and I went there on an ROTC scholarship. So yeah, the Army paid for my college. You know, the Army paid for my education. That's why people thank me for my service. I'm always like, fucking A. I served in the hot deserts of Saudi Arabia, sitting in an air-conditioned van playing Tetris. But I was there. In fact, I was in Saudi so long, I actually developed a burqa fetish. You know, Roy could see her woman's eyes and the bridge of her nose. I started to find that sexy. But I know underneath there she's glaring at the infidel. But I see that little wrinkle in her nose and I think, dude, she is so into me. In fact, even when I got back to the States, I'd be sitting at a bar, flirting with a young woman, staring at the bridge of her nose, trying to read her signals. It'd be a little weird. She'd be like, they're down here. All right. We're not so woke that I can't tell that joke these days. And then I got back to the States, started my own business. You know, I was very proud of myself. In fact, even today in my home office at home, I've got a framed copy up on the wall of my bankruptcy. You know, a few more of those, I can be president. Yeah, working on it. And then, you know, I got married, just doing the normal stuff, right? And my wife at the time, we were married long enough. That's it, we were married long enough. We were married, which is true enough. We were married long enough that I started getting in trouble for things that I didn't even do. Like we're watching this TV show called Humans. You guys know that show, Humans? Yeah, if you haven't seen it, obviously it's about robots that look like humans, right? And the lady robots are very hot. So right away, I was in trouble for something I didn't do. For something I couldn't do because they don't even exist. And she looks at me and she says, if you ever did it with a robot, I would no longer find you attractive. I was like, come on, we've been married for 25 years. You find me attractive? Yeah, who knew? I didn't know. But I did try to stay in shape for her. In fact, I joined a gym. And I'll tell you what, man, after just a couple months of gym membership, I actually went down there to cancel my membership. Because you can't phone that one in, right? They make you go down there. So I go down to the gym to cancel my membership, and I'm sitting there talking to this 19-year-old smiling muscle kid. And I'm trying to explain to him why my health is no longer important to me. And as I'm doing this, he starts getting upset. He's like, I just don't get it, man. Don't you want to come here after work and burn off the stress? I was just like, not really. I got a family waiting for me at home. I got to stop by the bar and throw out a couple shots before I get there. But I was only kidding with him. He started looking sad, and I was like, listen, man, it's not you, it's me. There are a lot of big guys out there. You're going to find somebody. So we're dating now. Which is okay with my now ex-wife. So, and kids. Then we had kids. You know, and kids grow up so fast. You know, my son moved out and started his career when he was 17. When I was 17, I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. He's there programming computers and teaching them how to learn. I had to learn how to fold a chicken wing into a little triangle. But after he moved out, I actually started to miss the little fucker. That's why I told his sister, you're not moving out till you're ever. I locked her in the basement, dressed her up in a burqa. Yeah. See, that's sick. Some of you guys laugh at that joke, but that's sick. Yeah. All right. But my son moved out and did this. And he and I got to a point in life where, you know, we were starting to become friends. Any of you guys have kids that are young adults to older? Yeah, and you get to that point where you start to become, you know, friends. And we were getting to that, and it was always very important to me, that I would spend time with him. And I modeled my parenting after 3 famous dads, right? Atticus Finch, probably the greatest literary dad out there. Homer Simpson, right? Because every now and then you just want to strangle your kids. And the third one is elephants. And that's not a joke. There was this special on TV. I think it was like National Geographic or Playboy Channel, one of these channels but it was about, does that even exist anymore? I don't even know. That's how old I'm getting. What's Playboy? And so these elephants, there was this preserve down in Africa, and these elephants were stomping rhinos to death. And nobody had ever seen this before. And we don't know what's happening. And they looked around, and there were no dad elephants. There were no big bull elephants. So they went to another preserve, and they flew a couple big bull elephants in, and they put them there. And they didn't make them take parenting workshops. They didn't make them read Dr. Spock. They just put them there, right? And the bull elephants stood there, and the behavior stopped. And as somebody who grew up kind of without a dad, it's not like a terrible story that everybody else doesn't deal with, but my parents got divorced at 8. My dad went down to South and Central America, and didn't really have there, so I just wanted to really be a good dad. I wanted to be that bull elephant. So I started spending time with Ian. And we would go play racquetball. We would go have lunch, we would go have breakfast, and I would just be the bull elephant. I wouldn't ask him, are you setting goals, are you saving money? I would just stand there like the bull elephant. And then he would start opening up to me. He would start coming to me and saying, hey, this is happening at work, or I'm considering this career move, and he would ask me for advice. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. And we were becoming real friends. And then we would send each other text messages. I'd be like, hey kiddo, I got us MMA tickets. Hey dad, I got us Van Halen tickets. Hey dad, can I borrow some money? I was like, he made more money than me. Hey kiddo, can I borrow some money? And then I sent what would be the final text message I would ever send him. Hey kiddo, are you around? Because you see, he hadn't shown up to work that day, December 16th, 2015. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and his boss called me and said, hey, Ian didn't show up to work today. And I said, well, that's really weird. And he said, I know, because he's the most punctual employee that I've ever had. And so I was nervous, and I called his mom, my wife at the time, and I said, hey, Ian didn't show up to work today. I'm going to drive out to his apartment and check on him. And so I headed out to the apartment, and on my way out there, I'm thinking to myself, see, Ian had type 1 diabetes. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with type 1, especially back at that time, but a type 1 diabetic has to give themselves insulin. So if they eat a slice of cake, they fill up a little needle with cake insulin, give them some cake insulin, it battles the cake. When they go to bed at night, they give themselves a long-lasting insulin, and so that it lasts 24 hours, kind of like your pancreas does naturally. However, if you've ever known a type 1 diabetic who gave themselves shots, every now and then, they will put cake insulin into the overnight insulin needle, give that to themselves, and it just wipes all the glucose out of their body. And they can have a really bad headache, they can pass out, they can go into a coma, and they can die. And so if I do this, it's because I'm about to lose it, just so you know. So I'm driving out to his apartment, and I call the apartment, and I say, hey, my son lives there. By this time, he was 19. I said, my son lives there, he didn't come to work today, I'm worried about him, and he's got diabetes, I'm worried that he's just laying there in his apartment, having a hard time. And they said, yeah, a couple of his friends are already here, and they've called the police, and they're gonna come and do a welfare check. I said, okay. So I'm driving there, it's about half an hour from where we live in Gilbert to downtown Phoenix. And I'm driving out there, and anybody who's been a parent and your kid wasn't where they were supposed to be, and you're nervous and you're scared, but in the back of your mind, you know that everything's gonna be okay. On my way out there, I wasn't having that feeling. It was just this weird blank feeling that I had. And so when I got to the apartment, the first thing I noticed right away is it was just filled with emergency vehicles and personnel all over the place. The second thing I noticed is that nobody was doing anything. They were all just standing around. So I drove up to where his apartment is, and I parked right outside the apartment. And I got out of my car and I started to walk to his apartment. I didn't know what to do, so I just started heading right for his apartment. And as I was doing that, a police officer came and intercepted me and said, "Are you Mr. Preston? Are you Ian's dad?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Mr. Preston, I'm sorry to tell you your son has died. And it was a suicide." And to that point, I had no idea. That shocked me, just like I heard people gasp just now. It shocked me, and I had no idea. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I turned around, and I went back to my car, and I sat in my car, and I made 2 phone calls. The second phone call I made was to my mother. And it wasn't really fair of me to do it, but I didn't know what else. I just said, "Mom, Ian died, and it was a suicide. Could you please call the family and let everybody know?" But the first call I made was to his mother. And the sound that came out of that phone is a sound that no mother should ever make, that nobody should ever hear. And I didn't know what to do. So what I said to her was, "We're gonna be okay. We're gonna make it. The 3 of us," he and sister, my daughter, the 3 of us, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna stick together, and we're gonna make it. And I put on my armor, and I became the strong husband, the strong dad at that moment. And I didn't know that I had done that, because even after that, I was very open, and I talked about all this. I didn't realize that I had really put on my armor so I could be strong for my family, until I saw a movie, again, one of my favorite movies, in a horrible irony, starring Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come. And if you don't know the movie, I'm going to tell you, so if you haven't seen it, I'm going to ruin this for you, but at this point, that's really your fault. And so in the movie, this couple, there's a car accident, the dad's in, they lose both their kids. And it's about how they deal with it, it's about the afterlife. But the mom ends up in a mental hospital. And one day the dad, Robin Williams, goes and visits her, and he's trying to be all supportive, and she just unloads on him. And he's like, "I don't need you to be supportive. I need you to be here with me." And as I'm watching that, that's when I realized, shit, I've been having this armor on, and I needed to do something. Now, throughout this whole time, the people who love me, my friends and family, would come to me, and they would say, "You need to go see a therapist. You need to join a grief group. You need to read one of these books." And those were all fantastic ideas. But at the time, I just thought, I'm going to try mushrooms. And that wasn't a light decision for me. So what had happened is somebody, I think it was my ex-wife, sent me a blog. Back then we call it articles. She sent me an article on how psilocybin and LSD can put one into a dreamlike state. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to try this stuff, and maybe I can dream about it. And it won't be the same thing as having him, but it'll be better than not having him at all. And my dad, when I said that they got divorced and he went to Central and South America, he went there because he was a DEA agent. And because he left when I was 8, I idolized this guy. My dad was this hero, fighting the drug wars, a DEA agent, 6'4", huge. And I was like, people who do drugs are bad people. Because my dad is going out there and arresting them. They are bad people. He didn't arrest drug users. He arrested the big, people who sold the drugs. But it doesn't matter. I thought people who did drugs were bad people. So here I am considering being a bad person and doing these drugs. And I also grew up in that era. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s where, a lot of drugs, were illegal because the whole drug war started with Nixon and these stupid laws, and so even pot, people that are a generation older than me, 5, 10 years older than me, smoke all the pot, have all the stuff. Even back then, people were like, ooh, pot, and I had plenty of friends who did pot. But I didn't do anything, and I just thought I shouldn't do it. And if I listened to the banter at the basketball court in my neighborhood, the drugs of my era were coke, pills, and pot. But one thing a lot of them would not touch was acid. Because we all believed all that crazy hype that it would break your brain, that you would have flashbacks, that it would destroy you, that you would end up jumping off of a building, and all these things. And so we wouldn't touch that stuff. And so it was very scary. So the idea for me to consider acid or magic mushrooms was really far out. Was not something that I could really look at. But I started doing research, and I found places like MAPS and the studies they're doing with MDMA. And I found Johns Hopkins and everything that they've done with psilocybin, helping people quit smoking, helping them with terminal anxiety, helping them in all walks of life. Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank was investing in a microdosing mushroom company. And I just started looking at all these things. And then I found Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary and all the work that they did and how they talked about set and setting. And I started to really understand what we were talking about here. And I know that there are risks, right? I know you gotta be careful. Those who have taken magic mushrooms and LSD may experience burning, man. Protest marches, man buns, there's all kinds of things that can happen, right? I'm subdued today with my dress. I usually have tie-dye Crocs on also, and so this kind of stuff can happen. And you gotta be careful. When I tell people that I have done ayahuasca ceremonies, they're always like, oh my God, isn't ayahuasca dangerous? Because they watch these stupid reality shows. And I'm like, listen, I've been in several ceremonies with well over 100 people. Only like 17 of them died. Nobody died. Nobody died. A couple people have a hard time, but nobody even ended up in the hospital. But you got to be careful. And so I looked and I researched all the set and the setting, the dose, the substance, testing the substances, understanding pre-existing conditions you may not want to do, drug interactions. I did all this research like so many of us in this room have done. And just as a side note, if you need still to do that research, look at what this group has put together. Adam has put together quite a library of resources that you guys can go out and find. Yeah. So you're in good hands here. So I did all that, and I decided that what I was going to do for my first ever drug. I mean, at that point, I had done no drugs except for like sugar and caffeine and alcohol. Right, but I had done none of these illegal drugs at all, not even a puff of cannabis. And here I was going to jump into the psychedelic world. I decided I was going to start with mushrooms. I decided 2.8 grams. It ended up being 3.2, but that's awesome. And I decided to start with that. And I did all the stuff that Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary recommended. I did the meditation, preparing my mindset. I built a room in Peru, for all this stuff, nice and clean. I covered up all the clocks. I learned something really good on Reddit that I still do to this day, is I put a little sticky note on the mirror that says, relax, you're on drugs. Because you're not supposed to go look in a mirror, right? Isn't that what they all tell us? And then what do we all do? Right? They're like, wow, look at me, I'm getting old. And so it's just, I have to have that reminder so I don't go crazy. And I went and I sat down in my big plush chair. I had the eye blinds on, I had earplugs in my ear, and I went through the whole experience. And I won't take you through all the details, but I ended up crying. And not like bawling crying, but just like tears, just like a river pouring out of my face. And I was like, I discovered what you guys all know. It was like, wow, this is what they're all talking about. It's just like opening a door to a whole new realm. And for this judgmental, conservative person who thinks that people who do drugs are bad people, I was just launched into love, right? And I just felt connected to all of you guys. I was like, wow, we're all one. And the Beatles are right. Love is all you need. And I got a message, and it sounds silly, but it's not. But the message I got was, it's all sausage and peppers, man. And that just means substance, right? Substance, not glass and plastic and social media and all that stuff. he was telling me get back to the substance of connecting with these human beings and enjoying this time you get in this intellectual meat bag that you're traveling around in. So it was very big for me, and I came out, it's like, it's a very mystical, almost religious experience. It was for me, right? And when I got done with that, I was like, wow, now I get it, now I understand. The second one that I want to share with you guys was an ayahuasca ceremony. Now, ayahuasca is a group, it's a ceremony, so several people in the group. And the ones I participated in have been anywhere from 8 to 30. I had the honor of interviewing Dennis McKenna on both of my podcasts, and his first ayahuasca ceremony was like 400 or 500 people in Mexico.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I didn't do that. 30 was too much for me. I went from 30 down to 8. And so I had done several ceremonies by the time I got to this one. And the way an ayahuasca ceremony is, you walk in and the room is laid out in a circle, and you pick your spot, and at the foot of all the spots is a little bucket. And I'll get into that later. But you go through it, everybody introduces themselves, everybody shares their intentions, which I stopped believing in intentions because the spirit of ayahuasca, La Madre, could really give a shit. Right? So I was like, okay, I'm not wasting my time on this intention thing anymore because she could give a shit. And I learned different things. But I also struggled to actually learn. So I set intentions, nothing really was happening. I stopped doing intentions and I started saying to myself, just let go. Just let go. Still nothing. I'll go through my ceremonies, amazing visuals, throwing up, music, love, all that stuff. But I wasn't, you go to the little talk at the end of it, and all these people are talking about, leopards and snakes and butterflies and spirits, and I'm just like, I saw some really cool visuals, you know what I mean? And that's what I got, and I threw up. And so I talked to a friend of mine who was battling breast cancer, and she chose plant medicine for her treatment. And she went down to Central America and spent a few months doing ayahuasca and San Pedro ceremonies down there, and came back almost like a completely different person. I'm not gonna say it cured the cancer, she did have to get some treatments, but she came back in touch with her cancer, in touch with her life. And I asked her, I said, so what am I doing? What do I need to change about how I'm doing an ayahuasca ceremony? And she listened to my whole story and she said, well, instead of saying, just let go, say to yourself, I don't know. I don't know what La Madre has in store. I don't know what's gonna happen tonight. I don't know. Because by saying I don't know, that is letting go. Saying I'm gonna let go is an attachment to an outcome, right? So I end up stuck in this outcome of like, I'm gonna let go, as opposed to saying, hey, I don't know what's gonna happen. And so on this particular night, I did that. I said, I don't know. And we all went through, shared our intentions, talked about stuff. We did the smoke and the dabbing and all that fun, good ceremonial stuff. And then I went up to the altar and I got my dose. And they ask you, kind of, what are you in the mood for tonight? Do you want a big dose, a little dose? What are you thinking? And you share it with them, and then they're like, yeah, I agree. That's what the spirits are telling me too. And so they gave me a full dose, which is what I always do, just a full dose. And so I did it, and I sat there and went through the same stuff I always do, which I had the amazing visuals, and I had the intestinal discomfort, and I got to the end of this. I hadn't purged yet or anything, and I started coming down, and I thought, okay, it was that same thing again. It's just gonna be this. And I went out back, got into a hammock, sat there looking up at the silver sky with the clouds, and I just sat there, and I ended up in this place of like pure consciousness, which felt really, really awesome. And I thought to myself, okay, I just want to be here, right? I don't need to have anything else. I don't need to do anything else. I'm just going to be here in this consciousness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in there and get a little small dose so I can continue this, right? Like I can control what's going to happen here, right? And so I go back in to get it, and there's some guy laying at the altar in the fetal position. He's got 2 of the 3 facilitators there with him. The other one's giving hape to somebody. And so I'm like, all right, I don't need to worry about this. I don't need to do it. I'm just gonna sit down at my spot, close my eyes, And eventually I'll go to sleep, wake up, listen to everybody's jungle stories and butterflies and snakes, and then I head out. So I sat down in my little spot, closed my eyes, it was waiting and I was feeling tired. I was like, okay, good. When suddenly all the visuals came back, which had never happened to me. And they're just amazing. So if you've seen, we all probably have our own visuals and it's ineffable, hard to explain, but just really three-dimensional cogs and all this stuff moving around. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. And then it all stopped and froze. And it like looked at me. You know, it didn't have eyeballs or anything, but it was just kind of conveying at me. And I kind of looked back at it and it said, I am La Madre. I am the spirit of ayahuasca. I never left you. I'm always with you. You don't need more medicine because I am you. And then she built this little contraption. This little silver cylinder showed up in between us. And the silver, I like to say, was so pure and reflective, it was like Justin Bieber's Tesla, right? It was just like this, it's something I couldn't almost describe. And then these little thorns of like brass came out of it. And then she wrapped it in this black ribbon. I call it mind ribbon, because when I looked into it, it just was infinite. It wasn't like looking into stars, it was like literally looking into nothing. And then she picked it up and she handed it to me and said, get rid of this. It makes me emotional. I know it's very obvious to psychiatrists and psychologists, but I get very emotional with this. Get rid of this. And as soon as she said, get rid of this, I used my bucket. And I purged. And the near explosion of freedom that came out of me was amazing. But honestly, I still didn't even know what had happened. But I got rid of it, and I purged, and I felt like somebody had pulled a thorn out of my ego, or whatever it was, and I was just like, oh, I don't know what happened. And so got some sleep, woke up, sat around with the people in all their amazing experiences, and I just told myself, don't share. Because I was worried I was gonna play an ego game, right? That I'd start jumping in, it's like, oh, you saw a leopard? Well, she made this thing for me, and then she got rid of it, and then the whole universe opened up, and, I'm gonna go bun my hair all up. And so it's the kind of thing that, I just wasn't ready for. I didn't want to play that game. So I got in my car the next, later in the morning, and I made the long drive back from Peru, all the way back. And when I got to that amazing mountain in Peru, Picacho, it suddenly dawned on me what had happened. That I had gotten rid of this notion that I was powerless to make any changes in my own life. And I got that by, we all get taught these models, and they all stick in our brains, and we have to unfuck them during our whole life, right? And so this model got stuck in my brain that no matter what I do in life, life is gonna come by and fuck it all up for me, right? So my parents got divorced at 8. It's not a sad story, right? It's just everybody deals with this shit. But my parents got divorced at 8. I had unrequited love in high school. I ended up in the Army when I did not want to be in the Army. That was a fight between me and my dad. And my whole 4 years in the Army, while they may have been very well decorated, I was a pain in the ass to anybody who outranks me. Yeah, because I was miserable. And I'm very sorry to all of them that I did that to them. And then I lost my business, and then my son died. And I just had this feeling of why try? Why bother? And she plucked that out in one sitting. And I like to say that sitting in 4 to 6 hours was as beneficial to me as maybe 2 years of psychotherapy. And I know because I went through 4 years of psychotherapy with a man that I consider one of the most important people in my entire life, because he helped me so much. But in 4 to 6 hours, I got the same epiphanal experience as I did for 2 years with that guy. Now I have a therapist now, and she watched the recording of this show, and I said that. And she said, well, why are you seeing me then? Why don't you just go do ayahuasca? And I told her, I was like, because there's a benefit. You know what I mean? Ayahuasca is great. Mushrooms are great. Jogging is great. Talk therapy is great. Do whatever you need to do. I'm done with that. Do whatever you need to do. I'm kidding. do whatever you need to do to help yourself, right? Now the good news is, when I first started seeing this current therapist, the very first meeting it was during the pandemic for her, and I said to her, "Do you know who I am?" And I didn't mean that like I'm really important. If you do any Googling on me, you're gonna see that I'm a druggie. And so I said, she said, "No, why?" I said, "Because you'll find out I'm a druggie." And she said, "Are you high right now?" And at first I was a little offended. I was like, what do you mean by high? That's not how psychedelics work. But then I realized ethically she had to ask me that, right? But I was still offended. And I will tell you that after a few conversations and a few sessions, she's actually going through getting trained as a psychedelic assisted therapist. So the more we talk about these things, the better. So those are just two little stories. I've been through some more. We were talking about peyote a minute ago and different things that have come through here. And when I do all this, just like all you guys, I end up feeling like a stoned ape. And that's where the name of this show comes from. And if anybody wants to get on my ass about calling it the Stoned Ape Show, I will just tell you that Dennis McKenna had no problem with it. In fact, he laughed at it when I told him. In our first interview, I said, "Hey, before we do the interview, you might want to go get your lawyers, because I have a podcast called The Stoned Ape Reports and a show called The Stoned Ape Show." And he laughed and said, "We don't need any lawyers." He said, "Terrence and I actually didn't like that name because people think of something different." And I was like, "Tell me about it, brother." Everybody thinks that this show is going to be about smoking pot and getting high, and it's a very different thing than that. But the name stuck, so I'm stuck to it. But Terrence and Dennis McKenna came up with this theory. There's a period of human evolution where we evolved very quickly. And to date, nobody can really explain it. And they had a theory that back when we were cave people, apes, our ancestors would go down to the prairie foraging for food, and they would come back with these little brown mushrooms. And when they ate the mushrooms, stoned, it would suddenly turn things on. It turned on their brains. It kickstarted evolution. Suddenly that we understood things like tools and language and the Grateful Dead. Yeah. It hasn't worked for me. I still don't understand the Grateful Dead. Still don't get it. But that's how I was feeling, and I imagine some of you feel this way. When I'm done here, we're going to bring two other stoned apes, and they're going to help me answer questions. But we feel like a stoned ape because we work with these medicines, and we grow, and we get transformed, and we evolve as an individual, and that's how I felt. And when I tell this story, people will come up to me and they're like, "Okay, great. So you ate a bag of mushrooms and turned into a stoned ape hippie. But has it helped you with your grief?" And my answer used to be, and I'm not sure, I think maybe I gave the old answer a year ago when I was here. My answer used to be, yes, but indirectly. It's not like I ate a bag of mushrooms and suddenly my grief was healed, right? Because grief doesn't heal. That's not something that happens. But I used to say, it helped me connect to other human beings. It helped me grow as a human. It helped me with my spirituality, and it helped me with all those things. So indirectly, yeah, it helped me with my grief. But what I realized is that it directly helped me with my grief. So when people say, "Hey, how do you," because the name of my book says, "How to Heal with Grief in Psychedelics," right? With grief. So we don't heal from grief. There's no moving on, there's moving forward. Grief is never going to go away. But when people say, "Hey, how do you do this?" My answer is, in order for me to get where I am, and it's not like I'm in a great place. I talk to you guys tonight, I'm breaking down. I see somebody who looks like Ian, I break down. I have memories of Ian, I break down. It doesn't get easier, it just gets less frequent that I step on those landmines, right? So I don't have an answer to say, here's how you get over it and move on with your life. That's not what I'm saying. But when they say, what was most important to you? I had to let go of my emotional attachment to Ian's physical presence so that I could be with him in memory, in love, and in spirit. And when I do that, I'm in a different plane of existence with him. I've got him with me in a whole different way. And that has really had huge direct benefit. Now, the piece of it, the neuroscience, there's a woman who wrote a book called The Grieving Brain. She's a neuroscientist down at that school in Tucson. And it's a really amazing book. It describes the neuroanatomy, the neurology of grief, which is basically our brains build models. And you have a model. So any of you who have kids, or a loved one, you have a model in your brain right this second, and you know where they are. You may not know exactly where they are, but you know if I say, where is your kid? You're like, oh, they're in the dorm, or they're in their bedroom, or they're playing over at Jimmy's. You know, whatever it is, your brain knows. And that's these models. And then when that person disappears, your brain keeps trying to find them. And it can be the time of day where Ian would usually walk in the front door. It could be some kid who wears a snapback hat just like he did. It can be all these things, and my brain goes, Ian. Nope, there's no Ian. And then grief hits. And the way that we work through that, through our minds, is neuroplasticity, which I'm sure many of you have heard can be helped with psychedelics and meditation, and just by waking up and walking through your day every day, because your brain naturally morphs and changes through neuroplasticity. And so the woman that wrote the book, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, I don't know which is the first, middle, and last, so I always say the whole name. So Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, I emailed her and said, hey, I think that I accidentally helped myself by using psychedelics. And I'm reading your book, and it's talking about neuroplasticity. What do you think about that? And she said, yeah, we think there might be something to that, and we're going to look at it. When you're a neuroscientist and you write your first book and do your first study, you can't say, we did drugs, or we studied drugs. They need to kind of go mainstream first, and then they can expand out from there. But even if she doesn't look at it, I know that there are other people out there who are starting to study neuroplasticity, psychedelics, and grief. So that right there helped me. I also got helped by understanding what I understand as the meaning of life and death and birth and the soul or consciousness or awareness or witness, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I was shown another level of this stuff, which is different again because I grew up a very hard atheist. And I thought anybody who believed this stuff was insane and stupid. And for me to say these things even now, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm glad my high school friends aren't here. But I started to see kind of that meaning, that understanding. And now I can be in my soul space. I can connect with Ian and I can feel him. And so I know that there's that connection, and I sense it. I still have doubt. My mind still comes up and says, I don't know, brother, is this really true, or is this just all something you're making up so you can feel better? I don't really know. But one thing I'll say from, Richard Alpert I mentioned earlier, now Ram Dass, he said something in one of his books that he said, I would rather cultivate faith than skepticism. And when I read that, I was like, fuck yeah. Why should I sit here and put that wall up in front of me and not at least open myself up to these possibilities? So that's how psychedelics have actually helped me with this grief. Could help you, could help other people. I don't really know. I'm not here to preach to you guys, but that's what it is. So you might be thinking that I'm standing here telling you guys to do drugs, and I'm not. I want to, but I'm not. There's a great Japanese saying that Mount Fuji has one peak, but there are many paths to the top. And I think we can all find our own path. It might be meditation, it might be psilocybin, it might be kayaking, it might be pickleball, it might be art. Whatever your path is, do your own path. I've talked to lots of people who did some psychedelic trips, and now they are major meditators, and that is their path to getting up this mountain. So whatever your path is, do your own path. So I'm not here to tell you to do drugs, but I think what the point of it is I've stood here and openly talked about death and grief and suicide and psychedelics. And my hope is that you guys will continue to go out there and talk about death and grief and suicide and psychedelics, because when we go out and talk about these things, then we break stigmas. And when we break stigmas around these things, then maybe people will get help. And if they get help, maybe they won't die. And maybe that is the something that's going on here today. So thank you guys very much. All right. So I debuted this presentation 4 years ago, all by myself, and I knew that people were going to have questions, and I was all ready to answer their questions. And then I could not answer all their questions. And some of you people, psychonauts, were also in the audience, and you guys started calling out answers. And I was like, I should invite these folks up on stage with me to answer the questions, because I don't know very much. And so I'm really honored tonight to have two people very important to me come up here and join and help answer any questions. So while they're giving their stories, think about questions, their stories, my story, whatever it is, and ask us some questions. That's what we're here for. So the first one I'll bring up is, you know this guy very well, Gary. You know how to use a microphone?
Hi. I wanted to start by saying, so, it's funny because everybody has that moment, that aha moment with psychedelics where this trip changed my whole, view of everything. And Stuart, he said that one trip changed everything. But I want to point out, it wasn't just that one trip though.
No.
It was all of those trips that led up to that trip that brought you to the place where you needed to be to receive that message.
Oh, I thought you meant the mushroom.
Well, the mushroom trip's always the best one. Look at my shirt. But I'm not going to bore you all with my origin story because all of you know it already. But I will say this. I took the class that I brought Stuart in on was a class called The Psychology of Death and Dying. And the class was phenomenal. A lot of it was about grief and about how grief is just about change. Any change, really, change a job, you grieve over that. There's all kinds of grief in life all the time. But I saw his story, and I was like, he needs to come to this class because his message is so poignant for what we were discussing. And him and my professor are now friends, and that guy's a great guy too. But I just love this man so much, and his story is so powerful and so needed. And so if you guys could all just continue to share, be open when we talk about these things. It's the stigmas around suicide, the stigmas around drug use. It hurts everybody. And if we could just be open and honest, I don't think there's that much danger in doing that. I think it's a safer way to go. No, that's all I'm going to say for now. I'll answer any questions you guys have.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And now I want to introduce Erica Lopez. So come on up, Erica.
Thank you, Stuart, for having me. I'm going to use notes because I'm not as cool as these guys. My name's Erica. I was born in the heart of Southern California in LA. And I went to an elementary school that practiced drive-by shootings. Yeah, apparently that's not normal. But lucky for me, my parents moved me out of the house of LA around 11 years old. Saved my life. But at that point, I've already faced a lot of adversity. And in order to deal with that shit, I started doing drugs, drinking a whole bunch. By 14 years old, I'd already done my first hit of LSD. By 19 years old, I was a full-blown junkie. One day I'm hanging out, and my little brother looks up at me and he goes, Erica, why are you wearing a long-sleeve shirt in the middle of August? And we all know it's hot as hell in August in Arizona, so clearly I was covering my track marks. He had no idea that he saved my life that day. I stopped shooting up right then and there and changed my life, but I was still drinking. A few years later, my 17-year-old brother that saved my life took his life and changed my life. I was already really good at drinking, so I got even better at it. And one day my best friend looks at me and he goes, that's it, I'm tired of this, let's go skydiving. So of course I go skydiving. And for the first time in my entire life up until that point, I felt present. Nothing else mattered. And I couldn't have anything else but that. So I started skydiving in 2011. I went to Hawaii, beautiful, did a skydive, had a parachute malfunction. Nearly killed me. I went to emergency surgery. I was in surgery for 13 and a half hours. 3 of those minutes I was clinically dead. They called me dead girl walking in Hawaii. I was lucky to be alive, but I started drinking again. Happy to be alive, right? Oh, let's celebrate. Go. one day my friend was like, hey, have you ever heard of ayahuasca? I'm like, oh, what's this? But I like drugs. I went and did ayahuasca, and the first message I got, Erica, you gotta stop drinking. I didn't know how. I went to Peru 2 years later because I failed over and over again. And I finally found community, just like this. I found integration, I found support, and to this day, I haven't drank alcohol because of that experience. It changed my life, and for the first time in my life, I started loving myself, I started believing in myself, I started skydiving again because I trusted myself. I achieved my skydiving dreams that I didn't think I was good enough to do. I thought it was just, having fun and partying, but I was a national competitor. I was on a women's world record team. I did shit that I really just didn't believe in myself, and I finally did it. Changed my whole life. Started hanging out with a bunch of these guys. Started doing what I wanted to do in my life. Fulfill my purpose of holding space, helping people integrate, doing the things that I believe in, and sharing my story with people like you. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, Erica. All right, what questions do you guys have for us?
Do you think the sequence is important? Because it sounded like you started with mushrooms and then you did ayahuasca later. Did sequence matter, do you think?
I think it matters. I don't know that you necessarily have to plan it. You gotta just figure which one is best for you and start there. In whichever way that is, it's gonna matter, right? But I don't know that I'm not gonna tell you there's a prescription to take and start here and then do this and then do that. I think you'll feel it.
Yeah, I don't think there's the right combination. I think it's whatever medicine's calling to you and whatever your psyche's telling you that you feel comfortable with. That's gonna make it more. It's gonna make it work better for you if you want to do that medicine. You know what I mean? Whatever that medicine is. So.
Yeah, and I carry some skepticism even to after my first journey, and I would hear people say, "Oh, the medicine called me," or I'm like, bullshit. You know what I mean? And then now when the medicine calls me, I'm like, gosh, that is that happens. And so it's I think that's how it will unfold. Who else?
Yeah, I'll ask a question.
Bruce.
Somebody told me that the marijuana stores in Arizona sell something like psilocybin or an effect that's like psilocybin. Is that accurate?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
There's the Delta 8, which is a different type of cannabinoid, but I'm not a weed expert, so don't ask me about the weed. But I know it's different. It's supposed to affect the receptor slightly differently. So if anybody here
I was gonna say, anybody want to answer that question?
The cannabis stuff.
Cannabis people.
What was the question?
Are there psilocybin-like strains or products at the dispensaries?
There shouldn't be.
All right, officer.
Sorry, I'm a cannabis psychedelics lawyer.
He's a lawyer, guys. He's good.
Okay, cool. I'm educated in this space. Guys, cool. To answer your question directly, no, but that doesn't stop them on the site from actually doing it. So there are synthetic psilocybin molecules like 4-DEO-MA or something like that. The issue is, can you sell them over the counter at dispensaries? No, those get shut down pretty quick. So.
I had seen there was a smoke shop around here that sold gummies that had pictures of mushrooms on them, and I can't remember if it said microdose or something, and some kind of strain of mushroom, but highly doubt psilocybin.
Yeah, I've seen that myself with chocolate bars, gummies, at smoke shops, head shops. Don't buy that. You're gonna get arrested. It's not legal. You can't have that stuff out there right now. It's totally illegal.
Good question. Thank you. What else? Daniel, do you have one?
I think I was saying the same thing here about amanitas. It's a mushroom that is illegal and is psychedelic, but very different from psilocybin from what I do.
Yeah, I have no experience with amanitas. Do you?
Not personal, but I've read a lot about them. So the active ingredient in amanita is muscimol. It can be very toxic, but you can process it a certain way, boiling it and putting it through a certain process that I'm not an expert in. I'm not going to give you any advice at all. Some people love it. There's a lady called the Amanita Queen, something like that, on Instagram that tells you how to do it, how to process it right so that you can use it. The indigenous people used to feed it to the reindeer and then drink the reindeer pee. So if you're into that, you know, whatever, I don't know. But yeah, it's a different thing. It's peaceful, it's trippy apparently, but there's danger there, so be careful.
I had the pleasure and the honor of going on a mushroom expedition up in Oregon. And not just the psychoactive ones, just all the beautiful mushrooms out there in the rainforest of Oregon. And one of the things I wanted to see was the Amanita muscara. And we could not find any.
We have them here, brother.
Yeah, and so they were just, because everybody is harvesting them. You know, so it does seem to be something that is coming about. Yeah.
Those are.
But I was there.
Yeah. Those are like the what they also call fly agaric or
Fly agaric.
Yeah, fly agaric.
They use them to I guess fend off flies, right?
No.
No.
No, they grow around pine trees, and they tend to grow in circles around the pine trees. They're pretty cool mushrooms. They,
Okay.
you know, the Super Mario mushroom.
Yeah, no,
The white
I
spots
thought
on
they
the
made
red
like
cap.
maybe like like you brew them and put it by windows or something. It was a
Keep
story.
spirits away?
Okay.
All right. I might try that. Thank you. What other questions you guys have for us?
Did you ever talk to your dad about your
No,
experiences?
my dad died
Oh, did you?
17 years ago.
Okay, so-
So the side comment about my dad. So I really do feel, whether it's real or not, that I'm connecting on this spiritual level with my son. So we have a shrine in his bedroom, and every night I go there and I say goodnight. And then through my meditation work and my drug work, I got to a point where I really felt that I was in that space where I could literally connect with him and feel him. And I would go into his room, and when it happened, I would start crying, you know, and not like, oh, I miss you, I need you back. It was more like, oh, you're here. And then I started having, because my dad and I weren't real close. And then I started thinking, oh, fuck, is my dad gonna show up now? You know what I mean? Is this something I really want to get into? Is this kind of space and have that happen? But yeah, man, I wish I could have asked him and seen. Because he was I'll tell you what, my dad was very rigid. And I feel like he would not have actually done anything, but his mind would have been that every dispensary here is illegal, and he would have been ready to shut every one of them down as soon as anybody gave him even an ounce of go, right? Because the Department of Justice has told them, don't do it. It's still illegal, but don't go busting the cannabis shops. And as soon as they say, leave a little loophole, or maybe on January 20th when the government changes, he would have been like, nobody's in charge, I'm gonna go take out all the cannabis shops. Some of these guys are very, very rigid. So I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe I'll ask them.
Thank you.
Nice shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Dell, everybody.
Dell, yeah, my name's Dell. That was very compelling. Thank you. It was very helpful. You had this amazing experience, this amazing breakthrough. Did you go back? Where do you go from there? I mean, do you still use the medicine, and how does it benefit you now? I mean, where do you go from that pinnacle?
And I guess I would say I had a couple really amazing. Did you want to answer something? Yeah. I had a couple amazing experiences, but I'm not sure I would necessarily say they were a pinnacle. They were important. They were profound. And what I have found over the years is I don't need to take very much medicine now to get pretty deep. You know, I'm spoiled because I went to Oregon, so I have a better kind of mushroom, right? And they're not crazy, but they're so good, and they don't taste as bad as cubes. And they're a little stronger, and I get much more like ayahuasca-like visuals. So I'm kind of stuck on those, but I don't have to take very much now, and I go really deep. But I think that the meditation has played as an important role as anything. I mean, Erica does, and I told her she can't talk about this because we're not here to sell you guys stuff, right? So I told her she can't mention it, but she does integration work, and a lot of people here do integration work, and it's a very important thing, you know, to do integration. I don't do formal integration, but if you're going to carry lessons with yourself, you've got to integrate it one way or the other. And so I think that meditation helps with that, and journaling helps with that, and living your day-to-day life helps with that. So I think that's, and yes, I still do the medicine. I'm going to be starting a mini dose regimen here pretty soon, where I do 0.7 to 1 gram of my better mushrooms, which probably equals like 1 to 1.5 cubes. And I'm going to do that every Sunday, because somebody interviewed on my podcast did that, and I've been just curious about it ever since. I was like, let's see how that goes. So that's going to be a new regimen for me, but the answer is yes. I think these are always going to play a role in my life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. Like, I honestly have gotten to the point where I don't take as much as I used to, but I also do a lot of integration, and integration looks different for everybody. Like, some people like yoga, some people don't. I like singing. Medicine, it is medicine, right? But for me, it's just maintaining. I kind of feel like I'm maintaining from those big mystical experiences that have gotten me to the point where I am now. And now I'm able to open up that gateway to allow myself to perceive life a little bit differently. So I'm seeing things, I'm reacting to things differently. My life is shifted just by that experience, but maintaining it and recognizing when I'm off balance and being gentle and kind to myself in that situation. I mean, like, hey, instead of going, oh shit, I'm ruminating again, I mean, like, oh, I'm doing it again. Okay, it's just that little flip switch that's made it a lot easier to go through.
Thank you.
I just want to tell you that last time I heard you talk.
I remember you sat over there.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really interesting because my mother had her sister die when she was in school, or she died when she was like my mother was 16. And my mother always used to tell me that if anyone mentioned her, so she's 16 and she dresses up in black, you know, like Italian women do in New York for a year. If anyone ever mentioned her sister's name, she would faint. And all I can think, and it was like, it really spoke to me because I didn't really factor in what you know about how this, you know, someone dying like that could affect someone. And she never had any therapy at all. She just white knuckled it on the Catholic faith, and it really fucked her up a lot. I mean, like, she would have been. I mean, all I know is it didn't really impact me like how bad it was for her to go through that.
Yeah, and you see a lot of that. So just hit me if you want to talk about it. So you see a lot of that. My mom is 81 and is just now grieving the loss of her mother, who died when my mom was 21. Her mom died of breast cancer. And she's just now processing grief. So yeah, I think a lot of people in previous generations were like Obi-Wan Kenobi, stuff your feelings deep inside. You know what I mean? And I think it's now a lot of them are working with mushrooms, you know, working with psychedelics. I talk to a lot of people that have silver hair like me, and things are bubbling back up.
Yeah, as far as like, but you explained sounds very much like a trauma response, like that fun, like fainting thing. And I experienced seeing it too. Like, I could say this now, that the last time we did this, my mother was there, and she still struggles. And that's a lot of my motivation to share my story, is to normalize these things so that she sees what it was that helped change me, and now she can believe that there's other options. It's not just the psychedelics, but just really giving attention to that trauma and to the things that do make you freeze or trigger, and just accepting and loving yourself along the way.
That was big for her to see that.
Yeah,
Every time you blow smoke, I think you're raising your hand.
I'll add on to that too. Everyone grieves differently, you know, and some people are far more affected than others. And you know, I've grown up. My mom is the worst. She will just go off the rails for just months and months at a time over, you know, a dog passing away, or what, you know, let alone a person. So I've watched her just kind of deteriorate. Her whole life just falls apart every time someone leaves the world, and it's like, we're all going to leave the world. You know, it's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us. And as a kid, I had to watch this process happen. And I learned not to allow grief to cause my life to fall apart if I'm still here. And that was the biggest takeaway I got from watching my mom struggle so much. Was just, I know that day's gonna come, so let's just let's squeeze as much out of this bitch as we can while we're here, right? I mean, that's the way I look at it, so.
Yeah, it's a good point that grief is different for everybody. And I talk about my story and I say I'm doing all this stuff, but at the same time I know that my ex-wife is going through 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times worse than I'm going through as the father. We don't like to compare grief. Every time somebody says, oh, I lost somebody, I said, yeah, I lost my son. Like, oh, my grief's not as bad as yours. Don't compare griefs. But I just know that when a mom loses a child, it's on a whole different style of grief. So it is, moms are just different.
Was she able to utilize psychedelics or any method like that to help?
No. So I have a 4-page list of boundaries with her now, so I have to go through my list and make sure I don't violate any of these boundaries. No, she did not go through it with me. And as a result, I diverged. And we were at Stamets, and Stamets mentioned something, and I think I asked Gary afterwards, I was like, hey, what the heck, what did he say? Because it hits so close to home. Because I will do, trip sitting and stuff like that for people. And if I have a couple that comes to me, I say, you guys both have to do it. Maybe not the medicine, but you got to be together. And then when Gary, confirmed, Stamets said the same thing. He was like, I'm not going to drive a wedge in between you. So no, she didn't go down the same road I did. I turned into a Burning Man hippie, and it has become a problem in our marriage. Also the fact that I kind of woke up to the fact that monogamy is not really for me either, right? And so these kind of things can get in the way of a marriage. And so she likes for me to point out that there can be unintended consequences from doing this. So I went and did it by myself. I didn't bring her along with me, and now that's where the marriage is.
I didn't have not had a traumatic thing occur like that, but going through a similar thing as far as one of us partaking in that kind of medicine and whatnot. Yep, I had read in a few books, I think, about that, and to closely work with the person that you love if you're going to go through that, to have them up to speed and understanding, because I think for some people who haven't had that experience, and then to see maybe someone they love be able to, I don't know, some moments I can be in complete joy and ecstasy, and there can be all this shit going on, and she's just like, how in the hell can you be so happy right now? Blah, 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 blah. I'm just like, this is the present moment. Like,
right.
Everything right now is amazing, but the future, the past, it wasn't. It's difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. And it's, did you have something?
Just like if you're in a household and there's somebody that's an addict, the addict itself can't do all the work by themselves. The whole house has to support each other and make those micro shifts together, because if there's still one person taunting or pointing the finger, the addict's gonna have a harder time making those shifts. So it's a collective. It's like looking beyond yourself.
Great point. Yeah. Thank you. Who else has a question? Yes.
So this might be a very surface level question. I'm super new and just starting to research, but
Perfect.
I used to be a major junkie too, and I caused a lot of harm to my brain in the process. And so I guess the place I get the most timid is, I know it does a lot of healing for the brain, but can it also do harm to the brain, or is there, what are those risks?
So consult your medical professional doctor. We're not medical professionals to be able to really give you a good answer to that. From what I understand, and I'll let these two guys give you a better answer, you're not going to break your brain, and you're really also not going to heal it. It'll do some neuroplasticity, which is good, but it's not going to put things back in order. But there are people who have had traumatic brain injuries and whatnot and go through this. It seems to be more a matter of what medicines you might be taking than it is what condition your brain is in right now. So regardless of that, I wish you the best. Yeah, and feel free to ask questions and use the resources here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best advice. We're not doctors, but there has been proven, studies shown that psilocybin, lion's mane mushrooms, they cause neurogenesis to occur in the brain. New neurons grow, new pathways are formed. So there is some strong evidence that points to it can heal your brain if there is damage there, or create a new pathway to make it work a different way.
Right.
So
I've had great results with lion's mane already, but
Nice.
the tripping stuff, I'm like kind of tiptoeing.
sure,
My toes.
you should always keep doing.
Makes sense.
Always start low. Something to research is just contraindications. Different medicines have different contraindications, whether you're diagnosed or not. Just kind of start from there and see what caused you, right? Take your time. There's no rush.
Thank you.
What else? Anyone else have a question? Come on, I know you got one. You're just like, I don't want to put my hand up.
Don't be scared, Daniel.
Go ahead, all right, Daniel.
Do you have any favorite teachings from Ram Dass on psychedelics and or grieving?
Any favorite what about Ram Dass?
Ram Dass stuff on psychedelics and or grieving.
So I'm reading his book. Actually, it's Mirabai Bush's book right now, where she interviews Ram Dass after he's had his stroke, and it's all about death and dying. And I think the biggest thing, I don't know if I have a quote, because I don't have a very good memory for quotes, but my biggest thing that he teaches that I practice and can see is just the cycle of birth and life, and what I am a soul, right? It's a C.S. Lewis quote that Ram Dass quoted is, I am a soul, I have an ego. It's not that I'm an ego and I have a soul, right? Once that perspective shifts, then one can start to understand the cycle of birth and life, and understand that this life, like what did you say, live the shit out of it or something? Yeah, we're here. We have these sensual bodies and these intellects to be here and enjoy our time together. And so make the most of that, because we do have this limited time to have that fun, but our souls are likely to just go on to the next thing when we're done here. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
I like that.
okay. Good.
Yeah, well,
I'll say this. This is what I took away from my peyote journey that I had, okay? Is that, I don't know if I've told all of you this, but I've told a few. So I was out there in the desert, and I had this moment where I was gonna put a log on the fire, and as I'm doing it, I look over and there's this tree right here, and I feel kind of fucked up that I'm about to put this log on the fire and he's watching me. So, but I had this realization that everything that's alive, right, is burning. We're all burning. This is how humans burn. That's how the tree burns. We're burning the fuel within us to live. And so once we run out of fuel, just like the fire, it goes out, no more energy. So burn as bright as you can for as long as you can and get the most out of it. That's what I took away.
It's like that podcast you sent me, that episode where Ram Dass said, he quoted somebody else, that life is like setting sail on a boat that's going to sink. So you've got this time to enjoy this before your boat sinks. Just like what Gary was saying.
Life's a gift. Take advantage of what you can do, and believe in the fact that you have that ability within you. And then take that mindset and whatever it is, whether it's going with medicines, whether it's working with other people or achieving your goals. It's a gift, man. Get it.
Any other questions? You guys are all worn out? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could speak to like how your grief has shifted through your experience. Like I know you talked about it being shorter, but for example, when I was young, one of my best friends died, and I noticed that obviously grief is immediate and overwhelming. But now when I speak with her and when I talk with her and I get emotional, it's more like this gratitude that I knew her and that we have that connection and that I can connect to her today. So there's still grief, but it's not a grasping at wanting her to be back. So I was just wondering if like the quality and how the quality of your grief has shifted.
The quality and the quantity of my grief. you're right. So I still hit those, I call them landmines, and my grief still goes to 100. Fewer and further between. But there is the gratitude. So there's a big thing with grief, is guilt. I feel guilty that I let my son die. I feel guilty being happy. I feel guilty healing with my grief. There's a lot of guilt, and the guilt is a little barrier that gets in my way. But gratitude is like the key to getting through that door, right? Is being grateful for my time that I had with Ian, being grateful for the way I get to be with him now in love and memory and spirit. And so I feel like I don't want to sound like, but the gratitude I think is a big one. So I think you hit that nail on the head. And it's something else. I think maybe you said it, but the happiness, yeah. When you're talking about being happy, and your partner's like, "Why the fuck are you happy?" It's. I believe that one time, maybe a year or two into this, my mom asked me. She said, "Can you be happy?" Which is weird for a woman who made my life absolutely miserable, right? But she said, "Can you be happy?" And I said, "Yeah," because it's like I compare it to a guitar string. That I've got all these strings in my heart, and I've got absolute total grief and anguish, and I've got happiness, and I've got pleasure. I got all these different feelings inside, and they're actually all always vibrating. So I've always got a little bit of happiness, and I can pluck the happiness string, and I can think about Ian, and I can feel both grief and happiness at the same time. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you. That was for me. Did you have something you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say yes, because you said as soon as I was hearing your question, gratitude, and just like because the survivor's guilt was really hard, and that was the biggest thing for me. And I recall specifically in an ayahuasca ceremony where I was able to face that part of myself with my little brother and forgive myself. So it really took me being accountable for my feeling of shame or guilt or whatever it is that we experience in those traumatic situations, and just taking that shit out and putting love into it and being grateful for the little time that I did have and the lessons that he gave me, and knowing that when he's around, I know when he's around. It's all love.
Beautiful.
Should we end it there?
Yes, I think so. Hey, give it up for Stuart Preston, everybody. Erica Lopez.
Thank you so much.
So we have other events. This Thursday there's a hape serving kind of lesson teaching workshop for anybody who's interested in learning how to serve hape. Hape is a tobacco snuff that's blown up the nose. It's awesome. It's really awesome. You got to try it at least once. What else? We got Ecstatic Dance coming up on Saturday, and that's where's that being held?
Scottsdale.
Abundant Space.
Yeah, in Scottsdale. So go to the Arizona Psychedelic Society website. You can see all the details there. Anything else?
Back here next Monday, and then Tuesday there's a decrim nature.
Okay, so next Monday here we got another talk, and that's on. Is it Ty?
I think it's Ty.
Is it Ty? So we've got our legal advice coming in next Monday to talk about psychedelics and how the laws are changing. And then Tuesday there's a decrim meeting that's held on Zoom monthly, and so you can attend that. Again, all of it's on the website. Thank you all for coming. Don't forget to take care of Alana back there. And we do have a place up here for donations. We're a nonprofit, so everything goes to keeping events like this going. And Preston's got some books up here. That the book he wrote, The Grief Trip. If you're interested, come check it out.
Thank you. Thanks.